I feel as if I've been waiting years to see Robert Eggers' take on Nosferatu. But if I feel like I've been waiting on Nosferatu to come to life, then I cannot imagine how the director feels. Because this has been a passion project long in the making. Eggers first saw the 1922 film back when he was only like 8, 9, 10 years old. And he's talked at length about the influence and inspiration that came from that film. And he lists that film's director, F.W. Moreau, as one of his biggest influences. And I really think when you look at that film and some of the other work by that director, you will see some of it still breathing and living today in the art created by Robert Eggers. Nosferatu is, of course, no different. You feel that influence, you feel that inspiration, but you also feel a new wicked tale that is just visually striking and captivating. It has this oppressive atmosphere, this bleak, desanguinated cinematography that manages to be beautiful and gripping nonetheless, power-packed performances that are transformative and riveting. Basically, I'm going to give this thing one heck of a positive review. So if you want to hear that, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, go ahead and hit the like button, because you're going to get a lot more Nosferatu stuff in the next couple days, because we're going to be doing this review. We're going to be doing a ranking of all of Robert Eggers' movies, and I'm going to be doing like a tier list for all the horror that I watched in 2024. But let's get to what we came here for. Let's talk about Nosferatu 2024 edition. The original Nosferatu is a darling amongst cinephiles like Robert Eggers, because the film, to this day, even though it debuted over 100 years ago and is a German silent film that they didn't even have proper authorization to do and to make this adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, despite all of those details, it really holds up in a lot of its craft. It's still a dazzling and remarkable achievement of filmmaking. And unfortunately, I think most people my age and younger have no real knowledge of Nosferatu, except for maybe the few who know him from appearing in one episode of SpongeBob.
Nosferatu!
So it's been a bit dismaying to see a lot of discourse online about this just being a Dracula ripoff, this being same old, a story that someone has seen 1,000 times. When it's like, yeah, guys, I mean, that's what we're doing. It's essentially a remake. Are we really upset the remake has a similar story to the original? But even if you did feel that the story was very similar and that there are beats that you were oh so accustomed to, I think there are still key differences. Mainly just even with the monster. This is no westernized, romanticized version of a vampire. This is not the Dracula that most people think of or see in their mind's eye. No, where Dracula may be a slicked back, charming suitor who wants to kind of romantically seduce you into his greater plot. Nosferatu is like a lecherous groomer who is just disgusting and despicable in every sense, starting with the way that he looks. He has no plans of romance. Like I said, he is a groomer, he is a predator, he is a manipulator, and he just cares to spread the plague and to consume you entirely. Now, if you're familiar with Robert Eggers' other work, like The Witch, The Lighthouse, and The Northman, then you already know that he is a meticulous craftsman when it comes to making films. And that these films so often are steeped in so much research, so much history, so much folklore, and Nosferatu is no different. And I think part of why Eggers is so tailor-made for directing a film like Nosferatu is because he is so interested in history and folklore and the minutia. He's so meticulous, he's so scrutinizing, and he's so attention to detail oriented, if you will, that you take all of those elements of his being and you tie it into an interest and a passion for the occult and studying kind of like the dark arts, if you will. And it makes Nosferatu just this perfect vehicle for him as a filmmaker. Few others could get on a set or behind a camera or take pen to paper and find a way to explore, to display, and to showcase like the dark, decadent depravity of the occult. And I think that's one of the strong points, maybe one of the selling points of Nosferatu. It does that in a way that other films cannot. All throughout, you have this monstrous antagonist. You have this cold, biting cinematography. You have a plague-ridden world. It's all monstrous and gross. And it's so horny and yet so displeasing and so all these things, and yet there's something a bit seductive about it. Something in our base nature that makes us go, you know what? I can't help but lean in and want more of this. And so just with his fascination with the occult, it kind of bleeds into the film, and then it bleeds into the experience as an audience member, and it bleeds into your own taste. And it's almost like this vicious cycle. And I think that's part of why Eggers, as a filmmaker, he's not for all. Like, my wife cannot really properly appreciate his work. She just doesn't vibe with it. She doesn't have those interests. She doesn't care about the history, the folklore, the occult, all of that stuff. But for someone like me, and maybe someone like you, if you have those interests, you have those passions, that is the way in which your brain is wired. You will get stories, you will get visions, you will get kind of like nightmare logic at times from Eggers' work, like Nosferatu, and you will feel seen, you will feel represented, and you will feel that things that you have maybe fancied or thought of in the past, maybe dreamed up in a cold sweat, and that all that has been like erected and brought to life is being displayed for you on the silver screen. Now, aiding Eggers in his exploits into the dark realm is an electric ensemble of powerhouse performances by all. It starts with Bill Skarsgård, who gives a transformative portrayal as the titular Nosferatu, as Count Orlok, and everything about this design and about this character that he cultivated is just movie magic to me. Because Nosferatu, like I established earlier, he is not some really handsome, rugged, alluring individual. He was a sorcerer who, through dark arts, became a vampire that way, which makes him one of the most powerful vampires. But also, because Eggers has that attention to detail and cares about the real roots and the history and the lore of vampires, he is like a rotting, decaying carcass that is almost reanimated and walks around. So at times he looks strong and hulking and menacing, but there's just parts of his body that look so withered and sickly. And this voice that Skarsgård has come up for, you hear no Skarsgård in it at all. I thought they had to do modulation for this. I looked into it. Turns out they did not. There's maybe one scene where he lets out a yell that they kind of aided in his voice, but no, this is all Skarsgård here. And that's what I'm talking about, this performance. It's amazing because he speaks through this vicious, snarling, gravelly hiss of a voice. And what's really cool about it is I mentioned that kind of decaying physique. This voice sounds so powerful and yet so labored that it feels like an undead being is speaking to you. It feels like he doesn't have like operational lungs, that he's having to forcibly draw in as much air as he can and will and force his lungs into working to strike up any semblance of like vocalization. And so there's power to that. And you get that in the surround sound of the theater, and like it just shakes you. Now let's talk about Nosferatu's main prey, the center of his attention in this film, as portrayed by Lily-Rose Depp. And there was so much complaining about Nepo babies when Lily-Rose Depp was cast. And that's understandable. However, knowing the type of filmmaker Eggers was, I never worried about it for a second, because he's not going to put someone in the movie who can't bring the work to life, that can't impress him in the auditioning room. And he has said that her audition actually brought him to tears because it was so visceral, so physical, and so feral. And I think those are all really great terms to describe what she does in her physical acting in this movie. She takes a thing that we're used to in horror. We've all seen 1,000 possessed girls in our time, but she just makes it feel more grounded, more terrifying, more intense, and just authentic in a strange fashion. And she credits a lot of this with her inspiration of Azella Joni's iconic performance in the movie Possession. And now knowing that, it's unmistakable. I can't unsee it. It makes so much sense. So I can't get on board with anybody who says that she wasn't good. I understand in moments that are less horrifying, when she is just talking, that it may feel like a big stage production or it may feel too operatic, but I think it fits the story, the world, the context, and did nothing to take me out with it. So I would love to see her do more horror. I thought she really shook up a lot of people in my auditorium, and I know she had an effect on me. She had an effect on her director, and I'm just really eager to see what else she can do, because I thought she was a tour de force in this. And I don't want to give anything away, but I'll say what her character goes through and the actions she takes, it makes this a really fascinating, dark, twisted love story at its core because of what's held and shared and fought for between her and Nicholas Holt's character, her husband. And originally, I didn't feel like that Thomas Hutter character even had much background to him. I didn't think there was enough there for me to latch on to him. But as the movie played out, I went, oh, wow, look at this guy. When he's on his own, when he's in a predicament, when he's faced with evil on his own, he seems kind of like he's wilting, like he's shaking, he's in a cold sweat, he seems a bit cowardly. But that cowardice is then juxtaposed with the man that we see later in the movie when he feels that his wife and her life may be up for grabs. Then he rises to the occasion. Then it's like a different person altogether. And Holt does a great job of embodying both those different men, even though they may be the same man at the end of the day. This was Ralph Ineson's third time working with Robert Eggers. He always brings something special to this. I love what he did in The Witch. He's again great in this film as a Swiss doctor that is there to help out Holt and Depp with what ailment she may have or trying to figure out what is going on. And he then goes and he kind of enlists the help of Willem Dafoe, who is just, again, a firecracker, just lightning in a bottle in this movie. And I felt like his performance was so different than everyone else in the film, but then so necessary. I just felt like he brought such life to that second and third act. I was just fascinated to see what he was going to do next. I hung on every line. Again, pure movie magic with the characterizations and the performances, the sequences that they're cast into, and then the beautiful way, the dark, gorgeous way that all those sequences are captured by the cinematography. But I did bring up Innocent to say that maybe one issue with the film is I can't wait to watch it at home because I thought Innocent was almost incomprehensible at times. His voice is just so thick and deep. And then you take on that dialect, you take on that dialogue, and I just feel like I lost some key information at times. And I know I'm going to take so much more when I can rewatch this at home with the subtitles on, but I feel like that holds up with almost every Eggers picture. Then one last shout out when it comes to our actors. I got to say, Aaron Taylor Johnson, not a guy I've ever been a fan of, and he's taken a beating in some circles online for his performance in this movie. I thought he was exactly what the script called for. People saying they didn't like his acting, and then they list traits about the character, and I'm like, but that's the character, and you feel those things because his acting made you feel those things about the character. He understood the assignment, and his character fits nicely into this role because there's so much like larger than life preternatural stuff going on. And he is a man who is self-made and wealthy and rich and loves his family. And he's just trying to be a good man, but he's also trying to believe in law and the sciences. And this just isn't a world where those things matter anymore. All that can be thrown out the window, and he's absolutely devastated as this movie goes on. So the people who weren't buying it, I just simply don't see it. I thought he was amazing, and now I'm like, you know what? I may need to start evaluating this actor differently, and I can't wait to see what he would do next. Although it won't be Craven that I next see him in, I will say that. My biggest takeaway from the experience and from this film is that it has now been 5 days since I saw it, and each day I have thought about the movie dozens and dozens and dozens of times. And there are just certain set pieces, certain frames from the film that are just so still very alive and crisp in my mind. And I just want to revisit it so badly. Like today I was working and I just so badly wanted to clock out early and go catch another showing of Nosferatu. So much of it has to do with the cinematography. Every frame matters. Every frame looks like it could be put up in an art gallery, that there could be an exhibit, and that you could pontificate about all the different themes of what the artist was trying to say with this piece, about how moody it is, how broody it is, how sexually charged it may be, what the subtext of it all may be. And I feel like there are so many layers to this story, so many takeaways. And then I like when I go on Reddit, I see people print out their ideas. This is my take on this. This is what I think about these characters and their relationship. This is what I think this shot means. I think everyone's overlooking this moment in the film. I think that this is being suggested by this shot. And so that just speaks to the craft of this film, the meticulous nature of the filmmaking and what was put on the screen. And I'll give you one of mine, because I'm talking about other people's ideas. I noticed that in certain moments of the movie, it almost looks like it's in black and white. And it seems like when Orlok is at the height of his power, at his most evil, when he's most in his area of strength, and this something besieged to his domain, it's like all the life and color is drawn out of it, and he is a vampire. So it's almost as if the picture has been desanguinated, and I love that. And it was cold, and it was biting, and it made me feel like this story could not have a happy ending. And I won't tell you if it does or it doesn't, but just to have that foreboding sense, that tension, and that dread, only because of the look, the color, the shot. That's just so much about the level of technical prowess that is in this film. The shots just seem to work on you subliminally, that they suggest so much more power about the themes of the movie, about our antagonists, and that they make it to where, just like some of the more nightmare scenes of this movie, some of the sort of dream reality stuff that plays out in your dreams, this movie will forever be a reality that you're a little bit different than when you first saw it. At least that's how I feel. I know I will be living with images of Nosferatu for a long time to come. All right, one last piece of internet discourse or criticism that I'd like to address, and then I'll get out of here. Is I've seen that a lot of people were a bit perturbed that they felt that there was more jump scares than they expected from Robert Eggers, and I cannot agree. One, not every jump scare is the same. The way you set them up and deliver them can make them hugely different, and I don't feel like I should have to explain that. But I mean, look at like the jump scares in something like Five Nights at Freddy's, and then go examine the jump scare in like The Exorcist 3, and tell me if you think that's the same level of filmmaking, if that's the same level of effectiveness, that it has the same impact, the same level of fright, and then get back to me. So I would say that I don't mind that they're in there at all, but also I would say that those aren't the key horrific elements anyway. I think what's at play in this story is horrific. I think the look and the powerful performance of Skarsgård as Nosferatu is terrifying and gripping and horrific. And I think the movie doesn't really use cheap tricks. It doesn't need cheap tricks. It doesn't even need like gore. The movie, its horror is coked out of repulsion and darker sensibilities. Like I talked about earlier, that kind of that more innate, deep down primordial darkness that we all maybe hold or enticed by, that even though we want to turn away and stray from it, it is there and there is a fascination. Hell, that's why we turned up to see this particular film in the first place. And it was released on Christmas Day of all things. So again, I don't want to get caught up in what people say online, but I just, so many of the key criticisms I see against this movie, I just don't see that at all. I don't see cheap tricks with this movie. I see a dark, brooding, horny, disturbing, sick, twisted, melancholic at times, atmospheric, oppressive, dread-packed, tension-filled horror pic that uses modern filmmaking and classical filmmaking to bring about a mix of scares. And sometimes it can be as basic as a horde of rats running through the streets or a pigeon getting its head quickly snapped off. It can be about someone working in the shadows and the occult going on, and things that your mind could never possibly conceive of happening in your world, suddenly happening in a world that feels very real and brought to life to you by Eggers and his crew. And so I'm going to give the movie a 4 out of 5. And come on back, subscribe, so you can hear me talk about the rest of Eggers' works when we rank The Lighthouse, The Witch, Nosferatu, and The Northman in a couple of days. Also, we'll be doing that 2024 horror tier list where we'll talk about all the movies I've watched in this year. I think it's like 25 to 30. So it should be a good time. Let me know your thoughts on my thoughts. Again, please hit like. I'm going to try to get the channel going a lot better in 2025. I've got some real ambition for this year, so maybe this can be a great big first step for the channel. Hope you have yourself a wonderful day. I'm Nate from Nate Netflix saying that's a wrap.